Ring ring! It's time for another episode of Crossplay Conversations, the show where we dive deep into the world of video games while keeping it light. I'm your host, Luke Lewis, and this week I'm joined by my co-host, the Wii U Wonder Kid, Jacob McCourt.
Hello! I bought some new Wii U games. I bought a Grail, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, which is one of the big ones. I saw a copy. It was pristine. And the price was under market, basically the cheapest I've seen it in like 2 years. So
Very nice. I always see the boxed copy with like the amiibo included in the box as like the display case item when I'm retro game hunting. Very nice. Heck yeah. That would be one I would like to own eventually. Although it'll probably just come to Switch, if we're being honest, eventually.
It's funny, I BlueSkyed about it, and someone was like, every time it's not on a direct, the price just goes up. But in this case, the price went down.
Very good. Very good.
You know what retro games price is probably going to come down after this game comes out? Final Fantasy Tactics.
Which is a great segue into talking about the new Final Fantasy Tactics. I was going to segue into a game you can also play on a Nintendo console, but either way, it works. Jacob, you've been playing the new Final Fantasy Tactics game, Ivalice Chronicles. I want to hear all about it. I want to hear your top level impressions. You got a chance to preview it during PAX, but now you've been playing the full game. You want to start with just like your top level history with Final Fantasy Tactics games as a whole, set the stage, and then we'll get into this exciting new release.
Yes. So off the top, thanks to our friends at Square Enix for sending over a code for the game. I have played through the entirety of this one.
Heck yeah.
All 30 hours of the game. And overall, I enjoyed it with
nice.
Like a few small asterisks.
Okay.
English is hard. But my history with the series, so let me start Final Fantasy Tactics, and then the SRPG genre. I am a relatively new Final Fantasy fan, where the first one I played was Final Fantasy 16, which is wild that I'd never played one before then. Like from start to finish, I had touched a couple, but never played one. So I've played 16, and then the two Final Fantasy 7 games I've now played. So this will be my fourth Final Fantasy game that I'm playing. I have played Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. So just so you know, Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles is a remake of the original PlayStation game. There have been a few other ones, including Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. I played a couple of hours of that one and enjoyed it, but I'm more of the Fire Emblem school of SRPGs is kind of what I go after. So there are some key distinctions between Fire Emblem and this that I'll probably get into later in the show, but that's my sort of history with this. So when I had the chance to play this one pre-release after having a good time with it at PAX, I was like, yes, hell yeah, let's go.
Nice. That's awesome. So you alluded a little bit to your top level thoughts of the game, but do you want to get into a little more detail about what you thought after 30 hours?
Yeah, so this is a tactics game where you carry around a party of folks to take on encounters, some of which more important to the central story that's happening in the game. It centers around a family. You play as, or the character that's in your party is Ramza. Ramza, if you like Game of Thrones, again, I'm going to be very story light with this one, to try and not get into any of the spoilers here. But essentially, it's a family of siblings who are, important, who are royalty. And so Ramza is a bastard. His father is important to the Beowulf family, I think or the Beowulf. I'm going to pronounce this correctly after I look up the spelling. Hey, it's Editor Jacob. Ramza Beowulf is, I believe, how you say that. It's one of those words that you see a whole bunch of times, but never say out loud until you get on a podcast. Ramza Beowulf, I think. But for all intents and purposes, 4 siblings, all of them important. In the chronology of Final Fantasy, there's a 50-year war that happens, and so this game takes place right after the 50-year war, and there's essentially at the beginning of the game a question about who should ascend to the throne. Again, very much Game of Thrones, and there are two sort of schools of thought of like who should, because it's a confusing sort of family tree where there's one party of folks who are like, this person should ascend to the throne, and there's another that said, well, this person should actually be in charge of the kingdom. And so the story goes on from there, but I won't say much more beyond that about the story. But you play as Ramza. You collect a group of different folks, all with different job classes, and that's kind of where the story goes from there.
Nice. That's awesome. So I know you're new to this entry in the series, but do you want to talk a little bit about the high level differences between the original and this remake, just so folks know kind of what they're jumping into?
Yeah, so obviously this game was, I believe, in 95 or 96 is when this PlayStation game came out. So to a certain degree, if you were to play it today, a little dated. So their thought there was sort of threefold if you think about the differences between this game and the remake. First off, a new graphical treatment. I think this game looks pretty great. It is, imagine when you go into the battles, it's very much like you're looking at a scale model or a small model of let's say it's a creek or a castle or an interior of a castle. And the art, including the pixel art, I really liked.
Nice.
So despite the characters being relatively simple as far as their what the sprites themselves look like, there's actually a lot of emotion happening with the individual characters themselves, especially when they're on the battlefield. Almost think like a little chibi guy or like a little tykes kind of looking character, as far as the profile of the stature. But despite that, there's actually a lot of emotion. There's several double crosses in this game, or several assassinations that you'll see from these little characters. And despite, not having a lot of, they're not large models, you get a lot of emotion out of them. So graphics is the first. The second is they've made certain quality of life changes to the game itself. Most importantly is a fast forward. So example, you take your turns. There's a turn order on the left-hand side that will be, you'll be able to see the 9 characters and who has actions next. However, the enemies that you're with could end up taking 4, 5, 6 of those turns depending on speed and whatnot. In the past game, my understanding is that you had to sit through all of that. In this game, you can actually fast forward through some of the more monotonous points of the game, which I think is modern. I would complain a little bit and say one of my biggest complaints with the game is that there's still a lot of menuing here. And for a first-time tactics player, there's a lot that you kind of have to learn, understand, internalize, and menu through. But I do appreciate those small quality of life changes, especially that fast forward I was using literally all the time. It's not perfect because sometimes your characters will have chats on the battlefield, and if you fast forward and you keep holding fast forward, you can accidentally skip some of the dialogue when the characters like start to talk. But apart from that small, you can even do auto advancing for some of the text on screen. But it's not perfect, but it's definitely much better than sitting through tons and tons of animations when you can just kind of speed through them. The third is voice acting. So there's never been voice acting for this game, and so all of the characters on screen are voice acted. I particularly want to call out Ben Starr. So Ben Starr plays
That's the magic
Dice
word
Darg.
for me right now.
Ben Starr plays Dice Darg, and a lot of the voice acting in this game is quite good. If you think about it from a delivery standpoint, some of it at times can feel Shakespearean in sort of the delivery, but what I appreciate is I think Ben's performance is probably the top performance in the game. There's no performance in this game that is bad, but it's just a lot of them are like, yes, that is what I expect from a character in a sort of Victorian medieval setting in the Final Fantasy universe. But his performances are just like a step above some of the other folks. He kills it.
Awesome.
In a character that, without giving many spoilers, Dice Darg is sort of a notorious character in the history of Final Fantasy Tactics, or at least he's sort of people know who he is and have thoughts about that character, and he absolutely crushes it to the point where there are some performances where you can tell, you can hear his physicality in the performance, even though he's very clearly just giving you his voice, and it's not a physical sort of body what do you call that, motion capture. There's not motion capture, but you can tell that there's physicality in what he's saying and doing.
Nice. Well,
and I'm not just saying that as a Ben Starr fan.
I mean, we're all Ben Starr fans on this here podcast, so it's a fair thing, but there's a reason he's like as prolific as he is at this point. You know, he's
good at the voice acting.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really cool. But no, that's super exciting to hear about all of the adjustments and things that they've done that it feels like just enhances the overall experience for what I've always heard heralded as this classic in gaming, and kind of a blind spot in my gaming backlog personally. I'd love to dig into some gameplay specifics. I meant to ask at the top, what platform did you end up playing this one on? Because I know it's on a couple.
Yeah, so I ended up getting a PS5 copy of this one, but it is available on everything. It's going to be on PC, awesome. PS4, Switch 2, and so you can kind of play it wherever you'd like.
Cool.
Which I would imagine this would be a great like Steam Deck or Switch 2 game.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I associate the series with the Game Boy Advance personally, just because of that connection. But yeah, that's rad. Okay. But on that note, let's dig into some of these gameplay systems. I want to know a little bit about the battle system, the job system, how you navigate the world map, all that good stuff. Let's dig into it.
So I will use Fire Emblem temporarily as a point of comparison, just to be able to describe the difference between this
point of reference for most folks.
So in a game like a Fire Emblem, in a game like the Banner Saga, what you're typically used to is a lot of characters on screen that you control to defeat your enemies. Sometimes it's 8, sometimes it's 15. It all depends on the scale of the battle. These battles are smaller by comparison. You will only ever have 4 or 5 characters on screen. And then in opposition to you, really there's never more than 8 enemies on screen at once. So lower person counts or character counts on screen, which means that you're getting more turns with those same characters. On the battle, you'll have that square grid where you're telling your characters where to go. You are doing either physical attacks that are directly adjacent to the characters, or you are using magic or arrows. There are tons of different jobs for you to choose from. One other small thing about this game that I kind of is something that I wish, and I get it because you're only doing a remake and it's a little antiquated, but the job system doesn't really explain itself super well. I think what they expect is for you to be more of a seasoned fan of either Final Fantasy or of SRPGs. And so with that, they don't really explain a whole heck of a lot. So it's a little different from other SRPGs in that also you don't just choose one job and then sort of stay in that job and then you evolve in that same job progression where like you're a knight and then you become a great knight. You can switch between jobs at your leisure. So let's say there's somewhere in the realm of 15 different jobs, stuff from a monk to an archer to a black mage, a white mage. You can gain level and experience in one job and then later decide to cross progress and go for something entirely different. Your character can only ever really have like 2 skill sets at once, but that can lead to some really cool combinations. So you could end up being a combination or a white mage that has black mage powers. You could end up being a knight that is also has an archer powers. There are also some really rarefied or unique job classes for specific characters. So, like a machinist, for example, that is good with firearms. You can cross progress that character into archer. So you can end up doing, having specific moves that can disable enemies' legs or arms as a machinist, and then you can end up having an archer's power to maybe pull back your weapon or draw back your weapon even even further to do more damage at the expense of more time.
Cool.
It took me hours to understand, because I went in without any sort of context, without looking up how the job progression system worked, and it really took me time to understand the benefit of certain jobs. How long am I going to stay? Number of levels am I going to stay in a specific job before changing to another? There are jobs that you can get later in the game that are based on a combination of leveling up certain jobs, and then you get a specific, like you could be a ninja or a samurai, and but those take leveling on a very specific path. So a little complicated, doesn't really tutorial itself well at all, at least from my playthrough. But it was once I really figured it out at about the 6 to 8 hour mark. I played this one again for about 30 hours. I really enjoyed it, and that was almost my favorite part of the entire game, is figuring out the right combinations, min-maxing those jobs, going out into the world, and trying some different stuff, or you get some named characters, and unlike Fire Emblem, you'll get some named characters, but then also you'll just get Joe Blows off the street that you can then take it with you to battle. I ended up in the end of the game, no story spoilers here, I had one of the folks that I had basically started with, that I had progressed from like level 1 all the way, into the 40s. And he stayed with me that whole time, and I'd cross-trained him in a bunch of different jobs. And I named him Jacob because, of course, I named him my character, my name. But job system, top-notch.
Cool.
So I talked a little bit of battles, the job system, and then obviously there's an overworld map where you're being told to go to different places to accomplish different goals, but also there's random encounters on the map too. So the one thing I have not said yet is this game is hard. It is difficult. And I'm a little baby gamer. So what I appreciate here is that beyond the improvements that I mentioned earlier, for the first time, my understanding in this particular title, there is an easy mode. So there's a squire mode for people who are no good at games, and I don't know what I would have done without that. I got to maybe 3 hours in, and the battles were absolutely crushing me. I could have sat there, I could have grinded, but your boy had an embargo to hit, so he said, I'm going to crank this down to Squire. It was still relatively difficult for an easy mode, but I was able to get through the game with way less resistance. There. The last thing I'll say, and then I want to see if you have any questions.
Sure.
One of my other complaints is that, of that 30 hours, there was grinding required.
Okay.
So there, I had, there's 4 major chapters in this one, and there's a point, again, notorious for fans of the original game, where the difficulty spikes. And at the one point, probably 2 points in the game, I needed to go and grind for a couple of hours to get my characters up in order to be competitive, because I was just getting absolutely wrecked without that.
Right on.
I guess maybe I'll say one more thing. There's
Sure.
also multi-stage battles too. So example, at a certain point, you'll be asked to, let's say, go after a siege in a castle. And in that castle, there'll be multiple stages where you can save in between, but you kind of can't leave the siege or the multi-stage battle that you are undertaking. So some variety. Sometimes it's a very easy battle where it's like, some animals are coming after you, and then sometimes it's very important to the core story, multi-part battle where you start on the outside of a castle and then have to make your way in.
That sounds cool. I'm curious, going back to the battles, or I'm sorry, the job system for a second, and just the overall pacing of the game. You mentioned grinding, you mentioned kind of a trial and error approach with the job system. Was that ever frustrating at any point, or was it fun to have that level of experimentation and going back and trying different things?
I think that it was mostly a fun sort of exploration. I think the thing I maybe would have appreciated a little bit more is if there was maybe a tutorial that I could really dive in on just to understand the intricacies, because I don't even know, obviously I know at a high level what a white mage is, what a black mage is, because they're so core to Final Fantasy.
Sure.
But even just another layer of tutorialization would have been nice, because I was frustrated for a little while and thought I was just really bad at this. But beyond being really bad at it, I think also the game doesn't do it does not hold your hand at
Okay.
the default difficulty or really explain the job system in great detail. I do want to reiterate though that it was a lot of fun to figure out, to
Sure.
experiment,
Yeah.
and to figure out the right combination of different roles. Because again, you can only have 4 or 5 people on the field at once, so sometimes and there are also CPU characters that can join you as guests, that are CPUs on your side that help contribute to your objectives. But yeah, it required a lot of experimentation in the job system, but also figuring out the right combination of dudes.
Gotcha. Okay. That's totally fair. You mentioned switching up the difficulty options a little bit. I'm curious, what's the accessibility offering like on this one? I've known in previous remakes or iterations of JRPGs, we've seen a lot of instances where you can customize kind of the amount of random encounters you have or that sort of thing. Can you fine tune the experience, or what does that look like on the back end at all?
My understanding is that there's not much from an accessibility standpoint, but I do want to call out that on the random battles, it's not like a Pokemon where you have to undertake it and at least get like menu into it and then decide, do I want to fight or run? You don't have to take a
Gotcha.
single random encounter. If you think you are OG at this and you don't need to grind and you just know how to min max every single battle, most random encounters you can kind of skip them.
Okay.
And then again, there are some in the map, typically when you are going to an objective, let's say for a lot of the game you're trying to save your sister Alma. It'll say Alma's in this castle, Peach is in another castle, and then there'll be one random battle where you might gather a guest character, or you might get a little more context on the story, and then you'll take on the major, so minor major. But as far as accessibility, to get back to your question, not much apart from some of the quality of life stuff that was done.
Gotcha.
At least
Okay.
from what I could see.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think the most obvious question that we have to touch on, this is a remake, reimagining of a classic franchise. Do you think this title will be equally satisfying for longtime fans and newcomers alike? Do you think it's kind of favored towards one audience or the other? What are your thoughts?
I think that this is probably geared towards either fans of Final Fantasy or like strategy RPG fans
Sure.
that maybe have not played the original game before, because it is a little difficult to. I would imagine this is on like a PlayStation Plus, the original. And the cool part that I haven't mentioned is that you can actually play the original game in this remaster as well. So in the main menu, there's an option to either play the Ivalice Chronicles, the sort of remastered version, or just play the original PlayStation version.
Oh, cool.
My understanding is, at least in the review copy that I was given, you could not really switch between them easily.
Okay.
But that they're both there for fans of the original and people who are looking for the remaster. Both of those things are there. So
Nice.
is this going to bring in new fans to Final Fantasy, or at least to the SRPG genre? I don't think so. But for those folks who, like myself, like I'm the perfect person for this, as someone
Sure.
who has played, a lot of the games that Intelligent Systems has made, like a big Intelligent Systems fan, both Advance Wars, Fire Emblem. I have played Project Steam, because I'm a sicko like that. This is made for folks like me. I just don't think it's going to expand the genre. But in my mind, this is a test to say, how well does this sell? Should we do a brand new iteration of this?
Right
Which, look, if there's a new version or a new tactics game that comes out, I think I'd definitely be interested in this one.
Cool. Well, that sounds awesome. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you'd like to expand on a little more?
I think that, again, there's some minor gripes that I have here, beyond what I mentioned about difficulty. There's some little tiny stuff. I think the camera is kind of bad in tight quarters. So essentially, imagine you're in a tight brick area outside of a castle, where there's an archway, and the archway is, let's say, 2 spaces deep. Your character, doesn't matter how many times you spin, because the camera, you can only really rotate 90 degrees at a time. It doesn't matter how many times you rotate at 90 degrees, you're not really going to see your character.
Gotcha.
The cursor also struggles with when there's two spaces at two different elevations. So let's bring up an archway again. This game doesn't do archways well, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Where under the archway there's a space, and on the top of the archway there's a space. Your cursor really struggles to figure out, like, do you want to be on the bottom or the top? And then beyond that, there's some minor stuff like when it's your opponent's turn. The pause is a little bit different, where you really have to wait till an enemy's turn is done to pause. And you actually can't control the camera when the enemy is going. So if they decide that they want to spin the orientation 180 degrees to benefit their point of view, but it actually makes your point of view bad, there's nothing you can do to change it, because the enemy has control of the camera. Little small nitpicks about this thing, but overall, this is a game that hopefully by the time you're watching this, I have a review up on the gamingbrief.ca. This game's in the 8s. It's in my mind, this is either an 8 or an 8.5, leaning 8, but I enjoyed my time. You can really only blow through games like this one. Again, I had about 2 weeks to play this one. I played the back half of it in the last day and a half. I don't think you sit there and grind on something you hate.
That's a quick turnaround. So I think that speaks to the quality. Nice.
Yeah,
well, that's awesome.
I enjoyed my time with it. If you're curious, I think it's something especially to take on the road with you on Steam Deck or Switch 2 or even a PlayStation Portal. I think it'd be rad.
Amazing. Well, I'm definitely intrigued.
Can I? Actually, one more thing. The story.
Oh, yeah.
The story, I think, is a cut above what you would expect in light games. I think there's some, without getting into spoilers, I think there's some really fun. It's very much like Game of Thrones, where there are multiple different factions, and then even the church that gets involved. And so there's always multiple parties, all with different objectives and motives that intermingle in an interesting way. I think the writing's pretty good, but I think it's the way they set up those characters and the things that happen that's actually quite interesting. And all the way to the epilogue, there was stuff in there, even in the epilogue, that I was like, the epilogue made me gasp a little bit, made me guffaw a little bit. And so all the way to the end, there's going to be moments that are going to double crosses, assassinations that are going to get you guffawing.
We love a good intrigue. Any intrigue. Nice. That sounds awesome.
And even when they set up the story in the first couple hours, where there's a very significant character death in the first couple of hours. I won't say what that is, but that death kind of cascades through the entire story as you go. It is something that will affect some of the major characters for the rest of their game. So look, I really like this one. I think it's good. I think it's a little dated, but I think other than some rough edges, because it's a game that was originally released in the mid '90s, this is a cool game.
Hell yeah! You heard it here first, everybody.
Cool video game.
Love it.
So again, thank you to for the folks at Square Enix for sending a code over. I might have a video on my social media as well, so make sure to give me a follow at Jacob McCord on everything.
Heck
I'm
yeah.
easy to find.
Heck yeah. We'll link to all of the cool content in the show notes, so you can check out more of what Jacob had to say about the game. With that, I think we're setting our status to away until next time. But before then, I'm going to ask you to do 4 things for us. You can give us a follow on BlueSky at Crossplay Convos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, also at Crossplay Convos. Send this podcast to a friend, because that's how people hear about podcasts. And of course, give us a review on your podcasting platform of choice, because it really, truly does help. And with that, don't blame me, blame yourself or God. Bye, everybody.